Hey guys, it's Katie, and I'm here today to talk about why I love the classics. I don't think I've really ever seen anything like this done before on BookTube, but my plan is to talk about all the genres that I really, really love and I go for, and just talk about one each week. Talk about why I love them, what got me into them, kind of my background and reasoning as to why I like him, and then maybe recommend some books to you at the end. So today I'm going to focus on the classics. And when I say the classics, I mean both the Latin and Greek classics, as well as literary classics. Now, you might be wondering, why do you like the classics? They're dull, they're boring, they're hard to get into, the language is difficult. And while that's all true, they're key and essential to understanding humanity, understanding society, where it came from, what made it change, and how we got to where we are today. It's also crucial to understand the history, what got us from one place to the next. How did we get from where we were to where we are now? And also see how language evolved, how the world evolved, because I think that's all important. I mean, I prefer the older stuff because I've always found it to be interesting and just love to see even how applicable they are today. Some of the older, in some ways, the older the text, the more applicable it is to the now. But I just love everything about the classics. They're, as I said, essential to understanding us. They're the foundation in some ways of humanity. Because not only do they show you, the language and the history and the society, but they give you a better feeling for what was going on at the time that the texts were being written, the books are being written. All of that is ingrained in us. All of that is important for the world that we live in. And it's something that I just really love about books in general. They take you to a place and you're immersed there for a bit. Think of it like time travel in a way. You get to go back to that time and experience something that you weren't. I'm going to give you some of my favorite classics that I think and maybe tell you kind of why I like them, why I think they're important. I'm going to try and give you a smattering, not just one or two or all of them from like ancient, medieval, and Renaissance, because that's typically what I do. I'm going to try and give you some more modernish ones as well. But the first duo I'm going to give you, because you can't really read one without the other, is the Iliad and the Odyssey by Homer. They are really important and really interesting because they're epic poems and they talk about so many different subgenres and subcategories, and it's a really fun adventure. I don't know how many of you guys grew up with mythology or just other little bedtime stories or have dealt with things that have talked about the Greek gods at all, but all of that is basically encompassed within those two books in some way. Many of the mythologies, many of the tales that we grew up with are in there, and I think that's really, really neat. I love everything about the Iliad and the Odyssey. They're fun, they're crazy, they have so much packed into them, and many of the classics you can pick up and read over and over again and always find something new to experience. Then I'm going to give you Metamorphosis. And a lot of you might be wondering, but wasn't the Metamorphosis written by Kafka? He wrote a weird version of it, kind of just modern and it's just strange in general. The original Metamorphosis is by Ovid. He's a really big dude. He's important. He's just everywhere. You go to Rome and you see buildings. Like, most of the art is based in some form on Ovid's Metamorphosis. It's just that big of a deal. And it's the basis for a lot of art. The Metamorphosis is a timeless book, one that you can read over and over again, one that you see all over the place, whether it's art or sculptures, poems, other books. It makes it into some movies and things. Like, some of the tales are more well known than others, but and then I will give you Dante's Divine Comedy. Brilliant tale, also applicable to today. It's a 3-day journey starting in hell, then going to purgatory and ultimately to heaven. There is a lot of symbology in it, a lot of religion, but it deals with very real things that are still applicable, like all kinds of different evil acts and crimes and things. And it's a story about judgment and then ultimately kind of reaching enlightenment. Really interesting, really fun. And you can even play a game with yourself once you're finished. It's like watching the news or watching a movie or something. Where would you place them in Dante's world? Which level of hell? Which level of heaven? Would you put them in purgatory? I mean, it's so fun, and I don't know, there's just a lot to talk about with the classics. You never have a dull conversation if you talk about them. And then I will give you Chaucer's Canterbury Tales. Brilliant tale, excellent use of satire, and an excellent study of society of the time. I mean, people wonder whether it was more of a medieval or more of a Renaissance tale. I'd probably put it more in the medieval, but it's right on that transition period. But the core of the story is more of a medieval tale. But you get different perspectives from different societal ranks, if you will. So anywhere from knights down to a miller or a woman or a priest. I mean, it's all over the board, and it's really fun to see because you get different perspectives about different types of life during the time. Next, I will give you Sherlock Holmes by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. And that's just kind of a fun one to me. It's timeless. It shapes in some way the way that we deal with crime, the way that we look at evidence now. Like, before that, we didn't do half the things that Sherlock does in the books. And there have been so many different adaptations. They've modernized it. They've done several movies, several TV shows, several versions of them. And there's just so much to be gotten out of them. And it's absolutely still applicable to today. I love it mostly because I really enjoy seeing Sherlock interact with other people, and especially his friendship/relationship with John Watson. It really speaks to me, and I find all of it to be just really fun. I mean, there are some stories I prefer to others, but that could be argued for most books if it's a series, for instance. But yeah, if you haven't read that, I'd definitely give it a read. Then I'm going to pick Morta Arthur, which is the life and death of Arthur. That's really a really big deal. It's a big legend. If you haven't heard of King Arthur, you should definitely read that. as soon as possible. It's a good example of showing, courtly love and fealty, and it captures certain aspects of medieval times in the book. And then Alice in Wonderland is really quite a fun book. It's whimsical and insane and kind of chaotic all at once. It's a children's story, but it can be read by anyone because you see different things in it as you age. So like when you're a kid, you just see this young girl falling down a rabbit hole and going on this trippy adventure. But then when you get older, you see all the potential mental illnesses that these characters have. And if you look up the Wikipedia page, you see that it was kind of meant to portray all these mental illnesses, and that's just kind of mind-boggling to me because I read them when I read the story when I was a kid, and I watched the animated movie, and just it's interesting to see the layers of it. It's not just a children's story. I mean, it is on its face, but you delve deeper and there's so much more to it. In terms of understanding politics and where some of that has come, you could look at first The Prince by Niccolo Machiavelli. That's a brilliant work to look at in order to understand how politics has evolved over time. But then also looking at some of the enlightened thinkers like Rousseau and Locke and Hobbes, our ideology, and have even just in some way they make up a lot of current political science theories. Like life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, that is one of the thinkers. I believe it's Locke. And so just understanding them will help you understand what our politics is supposed to be. So I mean, just the classics goes on and on forever, and there are so many more books that I can give you. I'm just giving you a few of my favorites. If you guys have, read any of the ones that I mentioned, or even some of the ones that I mentioned in other videos, because I decided not to mention the ones that I already mentioned before. It was not to just constantly repeat myself, but the ones that I mentioned over there are Jane Eyre and Pride and Prejudice and Dracula. I think I mentioned that briefly. But if you've read any of those or want any other classics and you want to talk about them, feel free to send me a message or comment or find me on some social media and we can have a conversation about it, because I always love to talk about the classics because it's always interesting to see how someone else interpreted something that you would also read. So seriously, come talk to me. I'm completely open to it. And that's kind of just an overview of kind of why I love the classics and how I got into them a little bit and some of my all-time favorites. And I'm hoping to do another one of these again in the near future with another genre. Maybe we can turn it into a thing. If you're interested in doing something similar, feel free to take my idea. But, in the comments if you decide to do it so I can come watch it and then we can talk about it. But play a tag. So, just talk about a genre or whatever. Anyway, that's kind of all I've got for you today. So, I'll talk to you all again sometime soon. Okay, bye.